check, check. Good evening. Welcome. We're here to take a moment to acknowledge those who have come before us, to acknowledge the present moment, and to acknowledge the future. We have a little display up here that is representative of the past, the present, and the future. Also, our influences, the earth, and our inspirations. So I invite you to take a breath and let this next couple of moments be a pause, a slowdown. We'll start by acknowledging our influences, our past, the shoulders on which we stand here at the Independent Media Center. I'll invite Fiona Carty and Amir Ammons to read the names of our lifetime members. And one more thing before I do that, if you're listening online and you would like to turn on the captions, you can do that yourself by toggling at the bottom of your screen over the CC and turning on closed captions. We will try to get the closed captions going up here for the panel. Question?
Yeah, can we turn the brights down? They're shining right at us.
Okay, we'll see if we can work on that. Yep. So, Amir and Fiona, we'll have you come up. I think we can be in front of stage. Why don't I give you this
Okay. Lifetime members and founding funders of the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center.
We give gratitude for their contributions, effort, and love.
Belden Fields.
Al Kagan.
Amy J. Aidman.
Anand Pillay.
Ann Robin.
Arun Bahala.
Barbara Kessel.
Ben Galuski.
Bethany Cooper.
Bill Wendling.
Bob Cook.
Brandon Bowersox Johnson.
Brent McDonald.
Brian Cribbs.
Brian Maxwell.
Karen Seichters.
Carol Ammons.
Carol Leff.
Colton Jackson.
Cope Cumpston.
Daniel Leward.
Danielle Chynoweth.
Dave Young.
David Johnson.
Donald Owen.
Ellen Knutson.
Gergana Slavova.
James Jacobs.
Jamie Hutchison.
Jan Kalmar.
Jane McClintock.
J. Schubert.
Jeffrey Seichters.
Jim Buell.
Joe Frutrell.
Josue Cisneros.
Karen Medina.
Kathleen McDowell.
Kevin Elliott.
Kimberly Kranick.
Larry Keller.
Laura Barnes.
Michael Covington.
Mara Thacker.
Mark Insulin.
Matthew Torino.
Meadow Jones.
Mikael Brun.
Michael D. Brunel.
Michael Hammond.
Mike Lehman.
Nancy Dietrich.
Neil Partroon.
Nicole F. Pyan.
Patricia Forden.
Patricia Jones.
Paul Rismandel.
Paul Young.
Pauline Bartolone.
Peter Miller.
Richard Espenshade.
Bob Ilyas.
Robert Chapman.
Russ Rybacke.
Sophia Noble.
Sandra Atten.
Sarah Canos.
Sasha Meinrath.
Sean Busby.
Sean Farrell.
Sharon Irish.
Sierra Shaw Murphy.
Siegfried Gold.
Stephen Johnson.
Stuart Levy.
Susan and Bertram Bruce.
Susan Parenti.
Tom Galvin.
Vesna Stojanowska.
Walter Matherly.
And Zach Miller.
Next up, I'd like to invite Al Kagan to come up. We lost one of our founding funders this past year, and we want to take a moment to remember Belden Fields, scholar, activist, teacher, and socialist. We have a candle made by one of our board members with his smiling face on it. Do you want to say anything about Belden?
Oh, I just want to remind people that we published in the summer.
People will be able to hear better.
I just want to remind people that we published in the summer a special issue on Belden with various remembrances by various people. So there's a batch of them on the table right over here if you haven't seen it.
And actually, Amir, would you like to come up again and help me sing a song? So as we watch these candles flicker, I invited Amir to sing a song we learned at Highlander Research and Education Center. And if you'd like to call out names of other ancestors you want to remember, feel free to do that. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know, I know. Come on in, have a seat. There's a couple empty ones up here. Next up, Cope.
We have fire, so it's time for a little earth and water. And this is a double commemoration. This is for the IMC as the root of so many wonderful things. And I have some magical seeds here. I vouch for them. They will grow into something very impressive. Whoops. And this is some water, the water of life. And this is also in memory of Latrell Bright, who was the director of the IMC for a time and brought her wonderful theatrical spirit here and produced a show called The Water Project. And water was very sacred to her. Earth, air, fire, and water all were. So I'm going to water these seeds, and we can all watch them grow.
And finally, looking into the future, I invited some of our panelists to bring their inspirations, which they can put on our display whenever they have a chance. And I also put one of my own as I prepared for the panel that is coming up next. I was inspired by this zine, and I'm a librarian, so this is kind of a library display in its own way. But this zine is called The Soil is More Important Than the Seeds. And in fact, these seeds that Cope just watered wouldn't be able to grow without this sort of alchemy of the water and the soil. And so I wanted to read a little piece of this zine by Ricardo Levins Morales called "The Soil is More Important Than the Seeds." One of the most important insights that cultural organizing has brought to movement struggle is the idea that the soil is more important than the seeds. Almost anything will grow in rich, nutritious soil, whereas it's hard to get anything to grow if the soil is barren, toxic, and won't hold moisture. The seeds are our projects, our initiatives, our campaigns, our organizations, our institutions that we want to build. The soil is the compost of beliefs, ideas, values, and narratives that create the environment in which we're working. I would pose this to you. What stories, what narratives, what beliefs, if they were widely disseminated in the soil of our communities, would make it easy to win? Just imagine it for a moment. What would make victories easy if everyone believed it? Now we're fighting against the weight of all these toxic narratives that people have internalized. We're the only ones who can plant the seeds of the tree that one day we'll want to live under. We need to be preparing the soil in which that tree can grow. So with that, our past, present, and future, I'll close out the ceremony by passing the mic to Sound Curiosity, who's brought their bells to us today.
Thanks, Miriam. Good afternoon. Over many millennia, humanity has cast and sounded bells for our most important ceremonies, rites, and rituals. This is one of those important ceremonies as we celebrate the first 25 years of the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center and the profound and positive impact it makes in our community. Our organization, Sound Curiosity, is honored to both be part of your celebration, but also to have our home base within your walls. We look up to you, we learn from you, and we aspire to have even a fraction of the positive impact that you have made over our first 25 years. So what we're about to present you, offer you with these instruments is not a song or even a melody, but the practice of a centuries-old tradition called change ringing. These 3 handbells, among the largest manufactured anywhere on Earth, will be rung according to a mathematical algorithm, 25 times, not only to celebrate the 25 years of IMC that have gone by, but with hope and our heartfelt best wishes for your next quarter century of service and beyond.
All right. So 25 years ago, a small group of people pooled their desires for a media democracy organization here in Urbana-Champaign. They were part of a wave of citizen journalism called the Indie Media Movement. And their vision and impact have grown incredibly in the past 25 years. Over these past 25 years, we've created a remarkable organization and community home. Our space provides a refuge for people who don't feel safe elsewhere. We've supported emerging journalists who've gone on to careers in national media. We've supported emerging artists, including this evening's duo, Mother Nature. Our collective of projects leads to creative encounters and collaborations. It's normal at the IMC to believe you can make a difference and that you can get a group together to design the change you want to see. As we step into our next 25 years, I want to share some snippets about where we're headed and why we need your support. We're expanding our staff so we can maintain our impact without burning out our volunteers. We're committed to paying artists, including all the artists you see on stage this weekend, because creative work has value. We're growing our education and training offerings to support activists and change makers with key skills like digital security and conflict resolution. And we're making significant improvements to our building to make it more accessible and more energy efficient. In order to keep our momentum, we need you. We need you to level up your support. We have an ambitious goal to raise $25,000 to honor 25 years and ensure we are strong for the next 25 years. The good news is we're almost halfway to our goal. If you've been thinking about giving, now is the time. If you're a yearly donor, consider increasing your donation. And if you've already given, thank you. Your investment isn't just in programs or buildings, it's in people. In the summer youth intern who finds their confidence and inspiration after working with us. In the activist who's better able to navigate conflict after a workshop here at the IMC. In the folks who want to participate but need to watch this event online, which they can do because of investments in our stage, AV equipment, and our sound engineers. And in recognizing elders like Jenny Barrett and Belden Fields and Dave Monk in our activist mural, shifting our local history narratives to include social justice struggles. So I'd like to invite you, if you would, in this moment, to support the IMC. You could right now get out your phone. I'm kind of not kidding. Get out your phone, open the UCIMC's website, ucimc.org. Yep, thank you. And make a donation. We are all in a different financial circumstance. I can't decide the right amount for you, but I would like to invite you to think about a stretch amount. I can't, to support our local non-corporate brick and mortar media space, not Netflix, not CBS, but indie media, with $25, which would also get you one of these cool t-shirts. Liz has got one on over there. Ty's got one on the back. So if you give 25, you can stop by and get a t-shirt. Or you could give 25 and then give another 25, and that would be good too. $200 covers a performer or a panelist. $900 covers an addition to our activist mural. And if you haven't had the chance to go see the new portrait of Belden out in the south ramp, Liz, can you point to that exit just so people know where it is? It's fresh paint. You can see Belden just with so much mirth and joy. It's going to be lovely to go visit him and ask ask for guidance. So that takes funding because we pay our artist to do that portrait, and it's important that we do that. It's not a volunteer job. You might consider giving $2,500. That covers a month of utilities for this building, 30,000 square foot that we own, but we still have to maintain and keep up month to month. Or about a month and a half of employee health care. Our staff is growing, and it's really important to me and to our community that we support our staff with good health care. So your support makes our IMC independently funded, and it's really an important time to ensure that we have that source of independent funding. Grants are vulnerable, community institutions are under attack, and local support is crucial for us and for all our sister organizations here in Champaign-Urbana. We are creating a rich soil that will hold our strong roots. We are facing scary times, but we are brave and we have extensive wisdom. Thank you for everything you've done to get us here, and thank you in advance for everything you'll do to carry us forward. Here's the next 25 years, and to amplifying every voice that needs to be heard. Thank you. We'll take a tiny break to get set up here. If you are still working on that donation online, you have a little extra time, don't worry. And we'll start the panel shortly. Thanks. There's stairs.
Hey, EJ, how you doing? I'm going to sit on the end.
Okay, whoever sits here is going to be in charge of the wireless microphone.
Okay, I'm in charge of a wireless microphone. Here, I'll sit on this little corner here. Let's squish people. Oh, you want me here, Gus?
I'm with Miriam. I'm gonna let Miriam make the call.
Yeah, maybe Miriam should sit here, and I'll sit here because she's chair. She's. You want to be here?
Okay, I can scoot down.
Okay. All right. So I'm sitting here. Okay. Yeah. We'll mess with your stuff, I promise. Oh, you can mess with this stuff. There you go. Mic check. Mic check. Hey, Maria, how are you?
Pretty good. Yeah. That was really beautiful.
Yeah, that was lovely.
Inspired.
Yeah. 25.
I know, it's a big deal.
We planned to get to 25. That was our plan, and
Well,
it
you did
happened. Yeah, and beyond. But
First 25 is probably the hardest, and then, you know.
yeah,
from
that
there-
first. Yeah, there were times.
Yeah.
So this will be your microphone.
Okay.
I do want to get a new clip for it so you can just leave it on the stand.
Okay.
But you can take it off if you want to.
Is it on? Not yet.
It should be on. Give it a test.
Test, test.
Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, we'll just kind of bring that closer to you.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'll amplify you accordingly to your voice. All right? If you have a soft voice, don't worry, we can get you some help correct. Take that off your hand. All right, I'll watch you guys. I'll be watching. No, you're fine. That's the purpose of it, right?
Where would you like to?
Yeah. You want to meet where I am? Yeah. And yeah. We were trying to figure out which end cap to give you. Like, Okay. Yeah, here, you know, this. I'm losing my voice, so I'm trying not to lose my voice. That's the story of my life. I'm always talking too much.
Raspy voice is going to be nice.
Yeah.
sometimes,
What's this? This is, yes, that's extra.
I thought you meant you wanted to go shopping for a new clip, but you literally meant, I'm going to get another clip.
That's right. That's right.
So Todd's going to start with this like mellow out and have people introduce themselves.
Okay.
Why is that red? BJ? Is that bad?
Yes, thank you.
This one
I'll be right back.
falls, or should I just like keep it like?
Nope, we need
got clips. I didn't know it was serious.
That's why we have so many. You just never know
Yeah.
when one wants to just kind of flake out on you. All right.
Check, check.
Thank you. Just so everybody knows, microphones are sanitized already, so if you have like the worry on that, they're sanitized.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I just try to generally, I generally like to introduce small amounts of virus into my body. So
Just a little something, yeah.
just a little bit.
You're right,
Once, just
right.
a little bit at a
Can't
time.
live microbe
Yeah,
free.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's it been going for you in crazy times? I've been thinking about all of our immigrant services partners a lot.
It's been overwhelming because I feel like the scope of services has changed. So like what used to be like case management, let's get people stabilized, let's connect people to resources, is now like the community itself is like reaching out like, hey,
Check. 1, 2.
what's going on? Is that happening? And more people are involved, but then dealing with the fear is like another thing that I feel lucky to be able to even provide a little bit of like information and comfort. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
taking it literally day by day.
Yeah. There's one who showed up in the shelter in the community. I didn't know anybody had a sickness. They were wearing t-shirts, both caps, tennis shoes. There were 7 of them. They were all in the shelter. They could not appear. Well, no, that's not true. We saw a sign on one of them. We know it was them because we didn't have anyone of interest in the application. And the young woman with her child who answered at 7 o'clock in the morning, like what the casino was, she was like, I don't know where you talk to that. They're looking for like education, their idea. And so we looked to a shelter and said, they did this recently up near Chicago, so but we already had it done. And I talked to a lot of people supported, and I trained our staff within 24 hours. The whole staff was trained. Our and we gave them some free listeners and so we got shocked in this process, and so I've been slowly shifting. It's like person by person, like group by group. As I talk with groups, I'm like, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, So I've been trying to, amongst homeless service providers, provide that kind of resources. But I was
You guys saw them before anybody else saw them.
yeah, I mean, obviously there have been raids before now, but in terms of
In terms of showing up at the establishment and being
yes.
yeah.
And I thought they were going to come to Township, and so I was like, we had our protocol, we put signs everywhere, everything. And then what we did, our leaders used to give to a bunch of other organizations, but it was wow. And what I tried not to do, because I know it's like the best I taught, I'm talking about it, because they came back recently. And I'm like, you know what? We didn't have to do that recently. They had raids in Lincoln Square.
Oh yeah, right. They were here Monday.
Yeah, Monday. But we had, it was pretty low key between the two, and so I kind of I talked with him. I talked with him, and she was, but I was like, so I let some folks know who might need to know, but I was also like, yeah, what happens is people get super panicked, and so
Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole of
exactly.
how do you steward the information in a way that is not engaging with panic, but
Yes.
that everybody inevitably is
talked-
already in fight or flight. But then also you can't just like not say anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the hardest part.
I also didn't want to draw them too much, or back to the office. So I tried it like So I did anyway. It was real like, ooh, okay, let's get going. Like,
Yeah, that's
crazy. Yep.
handwriting is so nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like kind
Oh
of.
man, these lights, I feel like
I know.
like a lizard.
We can turn them down just a little. Hi, baby. I love you. Thank you for your workshop. Thank you for all the things. Thank you for all the things. Oh, here I'm giving all the families. This is our book that's coming out, Nonprofit Press. Do one of those things. How to make change in systems. Plus, our publisher will be here tomorrow and discussion on the independent presses. And we'll do some story sharing at 10 o'clock right here in this space. But anyway, been working on this for 7 years is what I've been doing. When I get scared, like you're talking about, when I hit the panic button, I'm like, write the book. Just write the book. I'm freaking out, I write the book.
Miriam, is there any way we could turn the lights a little? They were good before, but then they got really bright.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's way better.
Yeah, that's nice.
I'm already
I
seeing
want to be
purple
able to see.
streaks.
I want to be
Yeah.
able to see. I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I know you all don't have a whole lot of time to like. I don't want to take anything from like immigrant service providers now, but what I want to do is be like, how can I make a structure for resource provision that's like really fast, so that it's
Check,
like,
check,
here's
testing,
what you
testing.
do, like, here's the method that you like.
Hello, everybody. Hello, 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 hello. We are going to get started with our panel. If you all want to find a seat. For those who do not know who I am, my name is Ty. I'm the program coordinator here. And before we get started with the panel, Miriam and I thought it would be nice if we did a little get to know folks activity. But before we do that, to keep us grounded, I think it would be nice if we take a few grounding breaths together. I don't really want to time it. I want folks to breathe as they feel comfortable, and I don't want you to feel rushed beyond my timing or anybody else's. But we'll just take, maybe 3-ish breaths together. And while we get ready to take those breaths, I invite you to really feel yourself seated in your chair if you are seated. If you are standing, really feel the floor underneath you. Know that you are here in this present moment, and really allow your body, your mind, your spirit to be here. Try not to think about what you have to do next or later on in the week, but really try to ground yourself here in this moment and really be in your body and allow your body to be in this space. So whenever you're ready, we'll take a few breaths at your own timing. All right. Now it's time to introduce yourself to someone that you do not know in the room. So we'll move around if you can. If you need to stay seated and you're like, I need someone that I don't know, just wave your hand in the air, just like you don't care. And we'll do this twice. Each time you go around, you'll ask this person a different question. And the first question is, what intrigues you about the IMC? So we'll take a couple minutes, find someone in the room that you don't know, introduce yourself, and then answer that question. What intrigues you about the IMC? I hope everybody is mingling. Take a few moments to wrap up your first interaction, and then we'll make another one. Or have another one. All right, let's start wrapping up this first interaction, and then I'll tell you the next question for your next interaction. All right. For question number 2, find a new person or a couple people if you'd like. And we'll ask them this next question. All right, I want to make sure everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, raise your hands in the air like you just don't care. All right, let's place our hands in our lap. If you can't tell, I teach kids. And the next question is, where do you come from? Who are your people? Where do you come from? Who are your people? So find a new person or people in the room and introduce yourself and answer that question.
Yeah.
I'm just watching.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I love visual note taking. It's kind of like I have to.
We'll take a few more moments to finish your interaction.
Like it's that process. And I love visual note taking, and I love what it does to our brains. It helps us think together, I think, It's lovely.
And then we'll start to make our way back to our seats so that we can move to the panel. If you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap 2 times. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. That's right. All right, we're gonna get started with our panel. Before we do, let's just check in to make sure we're still connected to our body, which is in this space. So as you settle in, feel your body, your bottom on the seat. If you're standing, feel the ground underneath your feet. And take one last inhale and exhale on your own. And I'm gonna pass the mic to our mediator.
Thank you. All right, well, welcome to Strong Roots, Rich Soil. This panel is moderated by myself. My name is Miriam Larson. I'm the executive director of the Independent Media Center. And for those of you listening online, I also want to welcome you. If you need the closed captions and are online, you can toggle them on by moving the mouse to the bottom of the screen and clicking on CC. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get them up here in the space, so sorry about that. Also, before we begin, I just want to shout out David Michael Moore, who's over here. We have the privilege of having graphic recording of this session, and so we're grateful to have David doing that while we talk about these big ideas. And then I'll also just say Magdalena, Novoa, her plane was late. She really wanted to be here, and her plane was gonna arrive at 3:45 p.m. And I said, "Are you sure you still want to be on this panel? I would love it, but are you sure?" And she said, yes, I really want to be here. Unfortunately, the airlines didn't agree, and so she sent some comments that I will read when we get to that point. But she may be listening online. So hi, Magdalena. So we'll start with one of the same questions you all asked with our panelists up here, which is, where do you come from? Who are your people? And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to answer this question for themselves. And actually, I do think I might start with you, Gus, and we'll just come down the row this way. And so if you would start by just saying your name and any other identifying factors that you'd like to share, and then share where do you come from and who are your people.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome. My name is Gus Wood. I don't know if this is on, but I can make it loud. Gus Wood, I am the president of the IMC currently. Also a professor in labor education program. And where I come from, my roots are the Black working class, always and forever. And my people are all oppressed people across the world until we are all free together. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Hard to follow that. But my name is Dua Aldasouqi. I am a local Palestinian. And I've got a lot of roots in a lot of places. I am Palestinian. I was born in Jordan. We came to the U.S. when I was 4. I've lived in probably 10, 12 different cities. My children are from Morocco. My husband's from Pakistan. And so I've got a lot of roots in a lot of different places. And I would say my people right now are those that are speaking up. So probably everybody in this room, everybody I've been organizing with over the past 2 years, everybody I've made connections with. I think right now those are my people.
Hello, everyone. Is this on? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Hi, guys. My name is Miriam Jimenez. In my professional capacity, I'm the executive director of an organization called Immigrant Services of Champaign-Urbana. I'm an immigrant myself. My family immigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old. So, I mean, honestly, wouldn't be able to navigate Costa Rica very well if I were to return. But needless to say that the roots of what my parents were able to carry on and teach me runs very strong in my blood and my veins. My people are people who are still recovering from being colonized, indigenous people who are still trying to recuperate from what colonialism did to us long ago, and now my people are the people that you see being persecuted and kidnapped on our streets. So, yeah.
Hello.
My name's Danielle Chynoweth. I come from coal miners from Cornwall who immigrated when the tin mining was exhausted in that area, moved to the Upper Peninsula, and from German Catholics in the 18th and 19th centuries, moving from southern Germany. I come from families that work through trauma, don't talk about trauma. I come from trauma myself. My mother told me I was very fierce as a child. Not sure if y'all are surprised by that. Who are my people? My people are queer people. They're nerds, they're curious, they're polymaths, they're makers, they're organizers, and they're healers. And I always say my people are you. You're my people. Y'all are my people.
All right, thank you. So then I want to jump into this question of cultural organizing and cultural organizing as a sort of concept was something I got to dig into more deeply last summer. I went to Highlander Research and Education Center with a couple folks from here to do a training on cultural organizing. It was a really special experience. It was a 7-day retreat on the land that is owned by Highlander in coal mining area of Tennessee and has been a 90-year movement center that worked with the civil rights leaders, worked with labor leaders, worked on education, environmental justice, immigration justice, and just has been a real leader in community organizing in our country. And so they shared a definition that cultural organizing is the strategic use of art and culture to shift policies and practices. So that's the definition I want to invite us to use today. And as I shared earlier in our acknowledgement ceremony, the zine that Ricardo Levins Morales published that I have up here, also he offers this about cultural organizing. One of the most important insights that cultural organizing has brought to movement struggle is the idea that the soil is more important than the seeds. So I think the IMC has been a metaphorical rich soil for our community. And I want to invite you to feel the warmth of this space, the potential energy, the protection from the elements, the rhizomal networks of connection between peoples and stories. And really, as we face multiple crises, climate catastrophe, rising fascism, that thrive on narratives of disposability, deepening inequality, that panic won't serve us very well. And so we have to plant our roots. We have to plant our roots deep and really cultivate rich soil. So I'd like to offer our panelists the question of why we need cultural organizing in this moment. And I asked Gus if he would talk a little bit first about kind of the cultural goals of fascism in particular, and then kind of why we need cultural organizing in this moment to respond. So I'm going to throw that question over to Gus to begin.
So fascism can only operate when it reduces the capacity for the oppressed to build movement action, capacity, resource, allocation, etc. And so I always turn to Italian revolutionary scholar Antonio Gramsci and his understanding of the power of cultural production. That in a sense, one of the first things that fascists often attack are the sites of cultural production, education, media, etc., to control it and to take it out of the hands of the working classes. And so the way fascism has to operate in any sense is to go after our schools. I mean, we've seen this not just recently, but this is something that's been going on for decades. In the 1980s, under the neoliberalization wave, one of the first things that the hardcore right-wing white supremacists did was to go after local school boards, to go after alternative media sites, the closing of newspapers in cities that belong to the black and brown working classes. So these are things that have often been done in piecemeal form. So fascism works as a long-term project to seek the power out of the cultural production that belongs to working class people. And so as a dialectic, because we often think of it as, well, they just want power, but it's not just that. It's to make it to where we have trouble functioning or sustaining a social movement. So we take our resources, we allocate them towards immediate threats. We see things happen, we exhaust those resources. But because they have taken specific things out of our communities that we controlled as the public, the way we use parks, the way we used to be able to use schools as a means of organizing, the church, the actual physical space of the church being a space of organizing for centuries has been removed. And so again, that's how it works. It works in these very insidious ways, whereas in you have the carnival barker out always talking to confuse and to completely disgust us. But on the backside, at the local level, which we must take more appreciation of, is where they're seeking to extract, like parasites, the resources that we use to ensure that we are protected, secure, and we are a community. And one of the most important things that we do as the IMC and other spaces do is we combat this by attempting to build a local movement center. These physical spaces that locate powerful resources, whether they be people, whether they be the physical part, whether they be finances, art, anything that we can use to house, to train leadership, to build workshops and political education, all the things that, again, going back to Gramsci, that the ruling class takes out away from us. They go after our school systems. We build freedom schools in our communities. Right? They go after our art and media. We build independent media sites, our own film festivals, our own newspapers, our own blogs. We have to create alternative productive sites to combat what fascism has done and continues to do, what it's done for the past few decades. So in other words, we often talk about the direct, nasty violence of fascism because it's two different fronts. You have the direct, but on the cultural side, for the past 3 decades, they've been taking hold and destroying our means to build power as a working class collective, to see each other as having different values and viewpoints. Because they know that when we had our own newspapers, we had our own public access television shows, we had our own spaces, that we saw each other having the same problem. And we always said those 2 sentences that the capitalists always hated to hear. I don't like the way we're being treated. And somebody came over and said, me too. So that's the power of why our IMC and other local movement centers are really the bastion of defense and offense. We have to be clear now. We are going on the offense against fascism with our local movement center.
That's right.
That is so important for us to always recognize that the IMC and other local movement centers be the offensive of building cultural power to knock down the dominant forms of production that fascism controls right now.
Thank you, Gus. And so I want to follow that with Magdalena's comments. She sent them an email, and I forgot to read the piece about roots, but I think she kind of integrates them both into her comment. So I'll read the first part now. She says, my name is Magdalena Novoa, and I'm sorry I cannot be here with you today to celebrate the 25th anniversary of such a critical and historical place for our local community. Still, I wanted to be present in some way, and I asked Miriam to read this text. I'm from Chile. I work as an assistant professor in urban planning at UIUC. I have been working for a long time with human rights organizations, survivors, and cultural heritage groups connected with or affected by the Chilean dictatorship in the 70s and 80s, many of whom are still looking for justice and their disappeared ones, and finding ways to memorialize their murdered relatives so that such brutalities will never be repeated again, and keep the memory of their loved ones alive. On 11th of September 1973, with the intervention of the United States, a civic military dictatorship overthrew the democratic socialist government of Salvador Allende, which led to 17 years of dictatorship marked by thousands of murders, kidnappings, torture, and disappearances, as well as censorship, repression, and social control. I grew up in the 80s in a family that was constantly imbued by fear and paranoia, even though they were not politically involved and rather supportive of the regime, I'd say. They would never talk to us about what was going on. But I have a very clear and embodied memory of the tense environment we lived in while growing up. The military in the streets, the Pinochet portrait in every classroom of school, that Chilean history in the school's curriculum that weirdly stopped on September 11th, 1973, and my assumption that every country's presidents were generals that lasted forever in power. I also remember my dad training us every once in a while as little children on what to do if we heard a bomb, shootings, or the lights went out, which happened very often. And for me, that was normal. I never gave it a second thought until now. I realized how ingrained it was in me and how much of what we are living today has triggered sometimes irrational fears or panic that something horrible will happen to me and my family, despite the privilege we hold. Between teaching, organizing, community work, picking up kids, and making dinner, every day I question myself, should I stay here and live through a second dictatorship? Are my kids gonna be safe as proud Spanish speakers? Will my visa be revoked, or could I be suddenly detained because of my accent or the work I do as an immigrant professor? Will my students be safe? Will my work be banned for using words like gender, social injustice, and anti-colonialism? Am I transferring the same fears that my dad did to me, to my own kids? All these questions are too familiar to me. The speed and ease with which words like kidnapping, erasure, and forced removal have flooded our language, flooded news updates about attacks on minority groups and immigrants, brings to mind the 11th September 1973. Though I wasn't born yet, that day lives beneath my skin as one of Chile's daughters. The new regime tortured and murdered thousands of Allende supporters. And because Pinochet feared free speech and a free press, public debate, and intellectual freedom, he specifically targeted writers, academics, students, and artists, just like every authoritarian regime does. Does it sound familiar? The consequences of that brutality continue to bleed in the Chilean landscape and the polarization of our society. The grief endures, and the wound is still open. Justice has been too slow and often not achievable, and we still don't have in place a memory and reparations policy. But although I spend half my days stressing out about what will happen next, having worked now for more than a decade, especially with women survivors from the horrible times in Chile, I cannot help but hold on to hope and resistance. These are bigger than fear and paranoia, and in significant part, that is because cultural organizing and the arts have shown us how these seemingly harmless practices can be a critical tool for denouncing transformation and solidarity across geographies, as well as for creating spaces of hope and coping in trying times. I'm gonna stop there and then I'll come back to her comments where she talks a little bit more about she had her husband bring in one of these arpilleras, which was made by the women she works with in Chile. So I'll come back to that. And then I'll pass it to Dua to again ask, why do we need cultural organizing? Thank you, Dua. Yeah.
Thank you. So our culture is who we are. It's how we see the world. It's not only how we see the world, but also how we treat the world. It's how we are individually tied to one another. I just returned from a trip to Pakistan to visit my husband's family. And we were there for about 2 weeks. The trip was beautiful in terms of connecting with family, learning to speak Urdu. I speak Arabic. I'm Arab, so I speak Arabic. But while I was there, I was able to learn a lot of Urdu because there's a lot of overlap in the languages. We shared a lot of food and love. Despite the language barrier, I learned a lot, but still have a lot to learn. And while we were there were aspects that I wish weren't aspects of life there. I didn't enjoy witnessing it. My husband didn't either. Even the people there, they had, questions or didn't appreciate it. And that's what I've been sitting with since you first asked me that question, Miriam. All these little parts of our identity make up who we are and how we see the world and how we treat the world. It creates our culture, and it in turn informs our organizing. And I think culture extends into so much more than the arts. As a Palestinian, I'm also a member of the CU Muslim Action Committee. We're a group that's in town that organizes primarily for Palestinian rights and self-determination. We've been around formally since the beginning of this year, informally since the beginning of last year, and the end of 2023. And as a Palestinian, we have a culture of sumud, which is existence through persistence. Every aspect of our lives, especially the Palestinians that live in Palestine, but also extends to those of us that live in the diaspora, every aspect is a form of insistence on existence. The clothes we wear, the kufiya, the olive branch, the oranges of Jaffa, the foods we share are all parts of our culture and of living despite it all. The Palestinian thobe, which is the traditional dress that has the tatris, the embroidery. I put 2 over there if you guys want to take a look at them afterwards. These thobes carry conversation through the stitchwork. Again, that's tatris. And now a lot of the ones that you can buy are machine stitched, a new cultural addition to our lives. But traditionally, these were hand stitched by women who loved you and your family. And eventually they were stitched by hand and then sold. And now they're just primarily stitched by machines. And you can tell the difference between a hand-stitched one and a machine-stitched one on the inside. The machine-stitched is neat. It's almost minimalist. On the inside, it looks almost exactly the same on the inside and the outside. While the hand-stitched is a maze of thread, lovingly placed. And then, you're in a machine, if you're familiar with sewing, it's 2 needles going in and out, running the thread through it. But of course, by hand, and you're going to go through the back to overlap and everything like that. And so it's this beautiful maze. And here in Champaign-Urbana, we share Champaign-Urbana, right? So in this community, we share the location that we're from, the place that we live. And within this shared space, we are creating a culture of resistance, of existence, and of community. We cultivate our organizing through this culture. We come together, we grieve together, we find joy and resistance together, even though we don't necessarily share all aspects of our culture. But merely by organizing in community, we've created this new culture. We've created a culture of action. And we didn't like what we were seeing in our existing culture beforehand, individualism, looking the other way, a level of consumerism that has consumed us. So we shifted. Champaign-Urbana has a vibrant history of this culture, but I think for many of us, that part might have been a bit dormant until the past, 2 years with what was happening in Palestine and then what's happening currently in our country as well. And when we get together and we share food, we share stories, we share a piece of who we are culturally organizing. I didn't know that was the name of some of the events that the CU Muslim Action Committee or myself had been putting on until after that training, where one of our members actually went with Miriam to that training, and she was like, "Oh, we've been doing a lot of cultural organizing here." And I didn't realize that that's what we're doing, but I just knew that we needed a shared space where we could be, where we could learn from one another, where we could nurture the parts of us that are torn by the violence around us. I knew I was hurting, and I had no doubt that I wasn't alone. And I think that's what we need to move forward collectively to be effective. We need our community. Without this community, I personally don't know what I would have done as I witnessed the horrors of the Israeli terror forces, what they've been unleashing on Palestinians, and I know that I don't stand alone. And so moving forward, we just need that community.
Thank you so much, Dua. So I'll move next to you, Maria. Why do we need cultural organizing? And you told me a little bit in preparation about how you use art to ground yourself. but also other rapid responders in immigrant support work.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say this is a great panel because, you know, it's like you come in with a vision of what you want to say, and then you hear people next to you talk, and your brain just starts going in so many different directions. So good job picking people. Something that was kind of coming to mind as I was listening to fellow panelists talk is that being a first-generation immigrant, so watching your parents try to take their culture and pass it on to you, but then simultaneously being put in the position where you have to adapt to a new culture. I use quotations because American culture is vague and hard to pin down, but is that you understand that culture is simultaneously so strong and yet so vulnerable. So you understand that there are traditions that are dying with you, that you're not going to retain 100% of the language or of the customs or of the perception, the way of seeing reality that your parents have. And you're just trying to kind of like put it all in your basket because you know someday it's going to be your responsibility to try to pass that on, right? And that is what makes art so crucial in all of this, is because it has longevity. It outlives the stories that we do or don't tell, right? So, for example, to put in perspective and kind of ground it into our local community, we're, just overwhelmed with how much indigenous migration we have here in Champaign County, right? And when you speak with these families and you interact with them, there is an unspoken pain that you grasp that they are carrying, because that indigenous language is more than likely dying with the children that they had, right? It's more than likely not going to be passed on. When you have languages that are barely have, maybe you can't write it, you can only speak it, you know that that's dying. So you're watching these cultural pieces just kind of like come to an end. And I think the role that art plays in that is that it gives us a canvas to really decide what we want to preserve and to blend our cultures so that they can extend beyond just the next generation, right? And so I feel like with cultural organizing, sure, working in a nonprofit, I can tell you a lot of what we do is just try to deal with fascism all the time. We're really just like up against this, probably a lot of analogies you could use there, but it's very difficult. And being in the position that I am now, I worried so much about, am I gonna be able to step enough into the mathematical brain for grants? Am I gonna be able to step into my logical brain the way that this job really might need? And I was actually humbled and incredibly surprised to find that to do this job well, you need creativity. It takes creativity to be backed up against the corner and not know what to do and to find a solution anyways. You watch the people that you're serving make something out of nothing and make it enough that they can share it with others. So I think the role that as community we have in cultural organizing is to understand that, the analogy of the melting pot gets used so much, but to really embody that and understand, a place like the IMC, our organizations provide individuals who are dealing with this pain firsthand, with this suffering firsthand, to create creative spaces for people to come practice and be who they are safely. And that is, it's crucial. It's the only way out of this. We have to restore autonomy. When you have chains and shackles all over you, right? And you can't fight back against the system, you can still have a revolution in your heart to not give up on yourself. I could probably go on a little bit longer, but yeah.
Super, thank you. So next up we have Danielle. Danielle, why do we need cultural organizing? And if this resonates, this question, how do we look for strategic alignment around cultural organizing approaches? You're writing a book. You have written a book, pardon me. You have written a book.
Not quite out the birth canal, but it's getting
about strategy. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. How do we align around strategy when it comes to cultural organizing and other kinds of organizing?
First off, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panelists and the audience, because the feeling since we started at 3 o'clock, which is when I came back here, is starting with song in the front lobby and singing songs of resistance and folks making song and layered song, and then coming in and remembering our elders. Mentors are such an important part of how we move in this moment. It's been an important part of my life, being able to remember those who have passed and to have ritual together, even though we come from really different cultures, be able to make something new out of that. So Maria, I really appreciate the kind of like, what do we take, what do we take from our histories and what do we blend together with others? I think reminds me a lot of folk music. Most of what I learned from history came from folk music and from listening to music and pulling those threads, because as we know, history in the United States is about wars and periods, and so it was really folk music that gathered that. I wanted to answer your question because in the world of organizing, we really talk about the importance of developing shared analysis, and that from the analysis flows the strategy, and then from strategy is the tactics or the interventions, the actions, the designs. And I think one of the, I'm gonna talk about the IMC in my examples, in part to give a little bit of the history and to give some context. But we, and I'll talk a little bit about this book as well. When Trump 1.0, the conversation at the time as I was flooded with all of these questions, Danielle, you've been an organizer for a long time, we've seen you make a lot of change in systems, like how do you do it? I think it was, at that time, I invited my co-author, Elizabeth, who's back there with Orlando. Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, Orlando. Came from New York to be with us today. Thank you. I asked her because, honestly, in feminist praxis, like, we never create in isolation. Like, we never create anything in isolation. We're always creating with others. And I invited Elizabeth to work with me to make this book, Remaking Democracy, How We Make the Worlds We Want. And what we tried to do was to develop a way of teaching strategy. The first part of the book is actually an analysis of the fundamental contradiction between capitalism and democracy that our president, Gus Wood, I think really spoke to, which is like the fundamental contradiction of our time. So trying to have a shared analysis. And I know at the IMC we do a lot of like convening folks, like what is our analysis of safety? What is our analysis of policing? Like what is our analysis of the, being a, liberal, progressive town that's one of the most segregated, racially segregated towns in the state of Illinois. Like how, we've been digging and trying to develop our analysis for a while, and from that comes the strategy. And so in the spiral of change, what Elizabeth and I teach is that we really start with story. We start with our experience, and from our experience, we gather people around those stories. We did that at the IMC. We ended up gathering from the 85% Coalition, which was doing queer rights organizing. We gathered from the Socialist Forum and Belton Fields and the work he was doing. We gathered over time with our incarcerated brothers and sisters, with James Kilgore's work, pulling together First Followers. We kept pulling from these different communities. I would say it's been, during the Iraq War, we gathered with our Iraqi community members, and most recently gathering with our Palestinian sisters and brothers and our immigrant residents and neighbors. So part of this is like gathering and then listening, and that's a piece that the culture that I come from has a hard time with, and needs to do a lot more listening, and listening for what's not there, and being quiet enough to hear what is not there. And then we begin to kind of knit together our stories into what are these problems that we're facing? Like, how did we get in this mess? What is the mess? How did we get in the mess? And what are the systems for which the mess is an emergent property of the system? So, like, what are those systems? Analyzing those systems. And one of the kind of origin points of the IMC, which we touched on yesterday in the session with Meadow Jones, was the School for Designing a Society. And that was a nest at the it was the nest through which the IMC was born in formulating desires. So the third step that Elizabeth and I talk about in the spiral of change is the importance of generating desires. So that as we are looking at the problem, what is our vision? What is it that we want? We should not only be mired in the problem, we should not only live in the language of the problem, because that world has been reproducing itself for a long time. So how is it that desire becomes actually this inspiration for us to think outside of the language and the paradigm of our problems? Core to the spiral of change, and Gus mentioned this in talking about dialectics, is really identifying contradictions. And so if we are only doing reformist work, which I will argue is really important from a political education standpoint, I will be the first to argue reform is a great place to build your base if you're a really small group of folks, small group of socialists, small group of, whoever group working, that, but it's important to, from that, identify the fundamental contradictions that we're facing. And the contradictions are all around us. And actually those people whose lives experience those contradictions every day, like, the Statue of Liberty and the way immigrants are being treated right now, that's a contradiction, like right there, bring us your poor, your huddled masses. No, we're gonna round you up, and chain you, right? So like, that's a fundamental contradiction. So one of the strategies is to think about contradictions as points of leverage for change. And that is actually where a small amount of input can make a huge difference, where a group of people can make something. And if you look at history, when change was made, it oftentimes started at those points of leverage. I will just finish by saying that is kind of in those points of leverage, that's where we design interventions. The IMC is a designed intervention at the point of leverage of media consolidation. I could have a whole other talk about that one. And then we act and we forage for the consequences. And indie media has been such an important part of us foraging for the consequences of our actions, because as I learned from Monty Bruin, who is a survivor of fascism, consequences are hidden from us through a kind of censorship by flooding in this particular culture. So we actually have to we have to locate each other. Like if we're not in the same room, if we're not looking for each other, people are doing resistant activities all of the time. But if we don't actually actively try to find them and record them, I'm looking at Cope, who has a show that's actively foraging for consequences on WEFT, right? And Gus does the same thing on the labor hour, like who's doing the work and how do we amplify that? And that is how we learn, is we see the consequences, we reflect on them, we change our minds, and then we do it again. We gather more people, we redesign we rethink our desires, we rethink our designs, and we do it again. And so I think, to answer your question, I think that it starts with story, it starts with connection, and also cultural organizing is threaded through all of that, through how do we think about our desires? How do we design? What do the interventions look like? How do those interventions go deep into addressing kind of fundamental structures that this country was built on, which was built on colonialism, and it was built on the labor of slaves, right? And so we can't move forward without repair, and there's no way to do repair without addressing spirit and heart. And doing that work and working in the arts is such a fundamental part of repair and healing and hope. And so that's, I think cultural organizing is key. And, having come from an activist tradition that really was all about kind of doing the work and convincing people and having our own propaganda, I think that's really a failed strategy. I think the strategy is that you build community, and arts and culture is absolutely central to building community and building shared analysis and stories. So, thank you.
That's a great lead into, I think, Magda's descriptions of the arpilleras and the group that created them. So to continue her contribution, she says, one of the many ways the arts played a role in organizing, not only locally, but also internationally, was the creation of the arpilleras textile craft. And you can come up and see one. There's one right behind the soil here. Women who worked at home in domestic care tasks, having their male family members stripped away from their households in these neighborhoods by the military, fell into a deep depression that was deepened by poverty and not being able to feed their kids. With the aid of an organization of the Catholic Church that was helping families affected by the repression, and the women artist Valentina Bone, marginalized women began crafting arpilleras that, through fabric scraps and needlework, denounced what was happening under the repression in their neighborhoods and families. The church would then smuggle them and send them to sell them in the US or Europe to help women with an income and make visible the horrors of the Chilean regime. Something so simple as an arpillera played a critical and subversive role as evidence that crimes against humanity were real and happening to many people in Chile. It aids in international court cases and Amnesty International and the ONU to intervene in the country. It also provided a safe space for women who had remained confined to their homes to talk to others about their experiences, support each other, and build networks of friendship and care. The regime later banned the arpilleras. Still, women continued to create them in clandestine ways during the workshops offered by Mothers' Centers, spaces created by the regime to promote women's roles in care and household work. Gosh, yeah, wild to read that. Today, 35 years after the dictatorship ended, arpilleras remain an essential tool for organizing and denouncing social injustices. Women continue to create arpilleras depicting various social and environmental demands. And they came here to IMC about a year ago, which was really special. For example, during the Chilean social uprising of 2019, groups of oh my goodness, that is a hard one. You want to say that for me, Maria?
What is it?
Arpilleristas. That's what it is.
Arpilleristas.
Yeah. Oof. Occupied public space, creating collective monumental arpilleras in the streets to denounce the social injustices of the neoliberal governance structure. The arpilleras have also been used in other conflicts in Latin America and beyond as a form of organizing and denouncing through the arts. Places like Guatemala, Brazil, and Ireland are some examples. I myself have been co-producing the monumental collective arpilleras over the last 5 years with a women-led organization in the Chilean coal basin. This region was strongly repressed for its left-leaning politics aligned with Salvador Allende and the power of their union. We have been organizing women to tell the stories of their land through arpilleras, making visible from a female perspective narratives that remain invisible in official historical narratives due to our strong patriarchal culture. My women partners came to visit UIUC last year, collaborated with Latina immigrants and quilting groups in Champaign, sharing knowledge across the Americas. Next year, they will return for an exhibit at the Cranard Art Museum. Cool. Furthermore, the cultural organizing work that I've been doing in Chile for years has inspired me to continue doing it in our local area. For more than a year now, together with dancer and choreographer Jennifer Monson and other local artists, we've been working with Latina immigrant families to connect them with nature, art, and movement, and to offer them a space for community building and healing after often traumatic experiences of migration and isolation in their new settings. In the words of a Mayan participant, being part of these workshops has given me joy again, a new life, new skills, and new friends. But more importantly, It has provided a space for my grandchildren, the future generations, to situate themselves in this place, to connect with nature and with others, and to learn that after all, we are surrounded by a beautiful and caring community. Muchas gracias. And so that's Magdalena. We can give her a little round of applause. Yeah.
Thank you, Magdalena, if you're watching.
Thank you, Magdalena, if you're watching. Hello again. And I had the chance to participate in the workshop last weekend that was put on by those families to connect with the natural space outside of Anita Purvis Nature Center. And it was really beautiful to have them share what they've learned and really be invited into it as well. So I have one last question that I'm going to sort of throw out to the group, which is, what resources do we need to advance cultural organizing? And maybe we start with, what do we already have, and then what do we need? And I'll sort of throw it to any of you to share, kind of, where do we need to grow? What are our growing edges, as Danielle likes to say, for our community? Anyone want to think about that? Where are we strong? Where are we doing well? And where does our community need to grow in terms of our cultural organizing muscle?
I think the first thing that we have to do, and I think Danielle laid this out perfectly, is we need to know where we are. We need a study of Urbana-Champaign. We need a in-depth study of our conditions and how we live. Because if we're gonna do honest, genuine political education, which simply means learning how we're living, what our conditions are, so that we can properly assess what the strategy must be, it has to first come from a detailed study of the oppressed of Champaign-Urbana. Because we can say that we think we know what's actually going on, but then when you go to the Black working class part of the city, and you actually see how the university is destroying those neighborhoods by gentrifying them, and small things like sidewalks, stop signs, the proximity to grocery stores, all the things that the working classes actually desire and need, not just to build community, but just to survive. We need this as a full-blown study to understand, so that everything that we do in building community comes out of the conditions of the people. So I think that's one of the first things we need. I think we also have to understand how to strategically use our spaces. I mean, we have our IMC, we have WEFT, we have Channing Murray Foundation, we have McKinley Foundation, we have other spaces that have relatively been used for movement struggle. But there are other spaces and parts of land that we need to consider, because the most powerful revolutionary resource that we can have is land and property. And so thinking about how we wield what we have and what we need to be looking out for physically is something that we can do a better job on. And the last thing that I'll add, I'm sure my panelists will add on, the other thing that we also need to consider is how we wield our resources, right? Because as our IMC, we've grown in such an exponential way over these 25 years, but we're not done yet. There's so much more that we can do. There's so many other communities, so many other struggles that we can be a foundational part of. And so actually having you all as members or community members actually inform us, what struggles are you experiencing? Where should we be? Because we don't want to just be just this isolated, sedentary site. We can be in our communities outside this site as well. You know, there's this adage called community stewards, something that the great unions used to do back in the day, where they would have a member of the labor union that would bring the community issues to be a part of the struggle of the labor union. They were called community stewards. Those were how you created the local community watch force, so that the police wouldn't come into our neighborhoods. We just did our own, making sure that we were all safe together. That came out of community stewardship. So that could be something that we develop over time, that we take from historical practices of revolutionary struggle, but of course we would shape it around the current conditions of today. But it's something that I think that we can take back some of our own capacity to protect and secure ourselves by looking at community stewardship.
Thanks, Gus. Do other panelists want to answer this question of kind of where are we strong and where do we need to grow?
Sure. Yeah. I think I think one place where we are strong and where we can benefit from each other is that we do have, as Gus mentioned, and just being here in the IMC, we have a lot of resources that already exist in our community, and being able to tap into them and being in community with each other. So for me, I have been organizing for Palestine for, as a Palestinian, you kind of do it all your life, but in a community, as a community organizer, that's new to me. I was in a student setting, and it's very different when you organize as a student on campus versus in a community. And so there's a lot of things that are very new to me. Learning even things like exactly how our city councils work, and something as simple as like what goes through city council was something that was very new to me. Spaces like the IMC that exist, I didn't even realize that we had these kind of resources in our communities until I kind of started organizing on a community level. And so I think one thing is being able to tap into whatever already exists, and we have a lot of infrastructure. I'm sure there's more that we can have and there's more that we can grow, but there's a lot already here. And I really love to see, I was talking to Gus about this earlier, how the IMC serves as genuinely a hub. So it's not only, they're not trying to take over the organizing space or be the source of organizing, but rather really a hub where you have these organizers working out of this space as independent entities. And I think that's really beautiful. And that's something that we could really benefit from. So for us, as CUMAC, the Muslim Action Committee, we've taken advantage in a good way of the resources the IMC offers, of Channing Murray Foundation, because we don't have our own independent space yet, but it exists within our community. So being able to really tap into that. And I wanted to touch a little bit just on the story that Magdalena shared of like using stitch work and artwork of women, and how listening to that, it's so strongly mirrored in what Palestinian women did with their tatris, which is that cross stitch that I mentioned earlier. It was a form of income for a lot of women, and in it is also a form of resistance in the sense that with different kind of motifs and different kind of images, there's different stories being told, and the history is being preserved in that manner. And one thing that we really have here in this area that's really nice is there is actually, on the last Thursday of every month at Salam Center, there's a Tatris workshop. So if anybody is interested in kind of learning culturally in that respect, I would invite you to check that out.
Super, thank you. We're gonna just keep going this way? Great.
Keep ushering
All right.
I definitely want to acknowledge when we talk about like now, like how are we strong now, this actual present moment, we are strong because we're having conversation. And that conversation is influenced by many different perspectives that, yes, share an overarching theme of liberation, but liberation for different marginalized communities looks different. And it's supposed to look different, and that's good, but the fear that comes in that is that, Trump 1.0, you called it Trump 1.0, there was a lot of movement that came out of that, a lot of conversation that came out of that, a lot of the seeds that were planted that we're starting to really kind of, be able to harvest, but then there is a place where the conversation starts to die down again. Mm-hmm. And then boom, Trump got elected again, and then, okay, we have all this momentum again. That momentum can't stop, because what ends up happening, right, is that few individuals in the community are carrying the suffering of marginalized individuals, right? So like when I worked in domestic violence, I was carrying the stories of locally what domestic violence looked like in Champaign County. Sure, there's overarching themes if it looks similar across the world, but specifically in Champaign, there's very specific barriers that women or individuals that are experiencing domestic violence face. So look at any movement, there's few individuals that are considered kind of like, experts, but they're experts in the sense because they're carrying those stories day after day after day. They understand locally what's happening here. And so when we have conversations like this, and it's open enough for us to just kind of speak our minds and speak to you from what we live and what we see every day, and that conversation doesn't stop, that is what keeps cultural organizing alive. So, yeah.
Thank you, Miriam.
I'll speak to the IMC. I'll take that slice for strings. So when we started the IMC out of a living room off of Carl Park 25 years ago, we did a lot of designing to avoid, which is something I learned from Susan Parenti and Mark Enslin at the School for Designing a Society, two composers who were like, you need to constrain and avoid, right? So we did not want to be sectarian. We did not want to be purist. We wanted to have many entry points. We wanted to design a kind of messiness between different communities and spaces. You will see that somewhat in the design of this space. Not that we're messy, we're not messy, it's a lovely space, but that there's edges between what's happening here and what's this gallery and this stage space and this mural, and there's a shoe. And I love watching people come in the IMC because they're like, there's finches, and what does that have to do with good vibes only, and what does that have to do with eggs dripping in the back? And so I watch people like, I see Olive just got here. You're probably having that experience right now. So that was intentional. We designed, our youngest member was 13 years old. Our oldest member was in his 80s. So like we, from the beginning, were that kind of multi-generational and creating those mentorships. So I think we're strong as makers, as experimenters, and making an open scene where people feel welcome. I think in terms of growing edges, Champaign-Urbana operates with a strong politics of containment of poor people and people of color, and the violence they experience is largely invisible, that goes very, very deep. And so I have organized in this community since 1995. I have worked with a lot of different people, a lot of different spaces. I now primarily work in the, with residents experiencing homelessness. And I see this time and again that it's kind of like a quiet containment, right? It's not Trump 2.0, but it's like as soon as you walk outside that edge, you're gonna be canceled by a power structure that will be, I lived in this town where they kept giving white folks the Martin Luther King Award. And, I remember when that first started happening, I was like, wait, what's going on here? And, and noticing the ways in which there's a kind of, I would say almost a colonization of progressive, visionary, multiracial organizing and kind of a pulling it back. And so we saw this with Nancy Cantor, who was our chancellor, who took on the chief and created the Center for Democracy in a Multiracial Society, and she was very much canceled and run out of this town. So that's like can show you that piece. So I think that's one piece. And I think that what we've seen, one of my strongest influences in organizing in this community is not only with the IMC, but is with CU Citizens for Peace and Justice. Raise your hand if you were involved with CU Citizens. I see James and Kim and Chris and others, where it was a grassroots direct action, multi-generational, multiracial, Black-led space that was committed to nonviolence, political education, and pushing policy. And I feel like one of the things we need is to pull all of those pieces together. I see a lot of and I think social media and the pandemic and fear has done this. I'm watching people spread out into their own spaces, into much smaller kind of echo chambers, and I worry about that. And so I'm trying to think, how does the IMC, how do we actualize Big Tent organizing at this time? right? I mean, even this audience, I love you all so much. It's whiter than I would want to see at the IMC, and I have seen it various times. And I think it's because we have been kind of sucked into our little corners again. And so I'd like to see us, how do we, what is the practice that we need to cultivate in this moment to reconnect with each other in our, both our brilliance and our humility? That's a question that I would put on the table, and I think that's a growing edge that we have. And I do think it's, I think that it is partly the result of a politics of fear and terror that we're seeing, is that kind of going back into our safe spaces. So I guess I would challenge us, this is a time when we should be working on self-regulation and like emotional regulation, because it's a really scary time. And I also think that like when I look into the eyes of a new person I haven't met, and I've already met a bunch of new people just yesterday and today, like that new spark of connection with a person I don't know, and like what we could do together is so powerful. And so that, I think, is our growing edge, is like face to face, looking each other in the eyes and really listening and trying to connect how my fate and my work is connected to Dua's work, is connected to Maria's work, is connected to Gus's work, is connected to Miriam's work, and all of your work. Like, how do we knit back those connections? That because we are being pitted against each other every day in so many tiny little cuts, of ways. We need to really build, like, be vulnerable and build trust from that vulnerability, and then be able to build back up from that.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I do want to invite y'all to share questions you have for the panelists. I was reminded that another kind of inspiration for this panel, part of my bibliography for this panel, so to speak, was the Fascism Barometer, which is a podcast by Echaurren Dixon, and I just so appreciate that podcast for really bringing an analysis of fascism, but also the way she opens the podcast with this very calm voice. Like, just her presentation, I think, grounds me when I listen to it and reminds me that we know so much, and that we can start from a place of grounding and listen well and learn well when we're there. So look it up, Fascism Barometer, podcast by Echaurren Dixon. Are there any questions that folks have for the panelists? Over here. I'm going to ask you to take the mic just so we can capture it online, and maybe someone could help me be a mic runner.
Hi. So I see a lot of people here from, many wonderful communities, both within and outside the IMC, but I can't help but think about the community leaders who I know, like the communities that I know that aren't here tonight. So and to your comment of, not just self-regulation and building together, but outreach, how do we build that big tent? What do you have in terms of plans for dealing with that?
What do we have in terms of plans?
For building a big tent.
Anyone want to speak to that? Kind of how do we do outreach is what I was hearing. How do we build bigger tents, coalition building perhaps as well? Any thoughts?
Oh, I'll speak to that. So I also, another hat I wear is as Township Supervisor, and we work with about 5,000 no or very low income residents in the community every year, and build really strong, trusted relationships within that space. And one of the things that we've been doing is, because so many people of all classes, but particularly folks who have really been shut in, who might be experiencing disabilities, and like feeling wanting to help people come out of pandemic and reconnect with folks is we've been having a series of writing workshops here with Meadow Jones. We have, before we had gallery presentations of experiences of homelessness. We've had spoken word events that actually, gave rise to whole books about healing from domestic violence. And so I think that someone said it, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, it might have been Dua, but we are creating spaces here where many different folks can gather. What do you say, the hub of independent organizing. It's not like you're, IMC is not like we're the brand and we're trying to grab your brand, we're trying to grab and pull you into our thing. The original design of IMC, which I still find resilient here, is that we are not any one community, and we are not trying to we're not a club or a party or a something to bring you into our thing. That it really is that we're trying to host safe space and supported and resourced space. Resource space is really important, so that people can plant what they want here. And so I do think that one of the things is if you were to hang out at the IMC over, say, a 7-day period, evening, morning, et cetera, you would see that nursery of projects. And there's many, many different projects that different groups who are not asked to merge their identity with some other group. You don't have to be Marxist. You don't have to be, you don't have to be a vegetarian. You can, you can come and do your thing here, and we will support you. And there's some boundaries. We don't do hate speech. We don't do hard targeting of folks. We don't take a punishment model towards things. There's certain boundaries we have set. But generally speaking, within that, we are an open scene and community space, and I think that has created fertile soil for a lot of what you see in the space.
Does anyone else want to speak to the outreach piece? What outreach we need?
I have something.
Yeah, I think I just real quick. I think that one of the things that we often don't talk about is the expansion of our programming, whereas may not look like it tonight, but as Danielle said, when you come into the IMC at any point, you're going to see multiple different groups of communities. Many of them were not here years ago, but are here now. And I definitely want to give a big shout out to Ty Lewis for doing amazing work with our programming. I mean, seriously, our community nights event have completely transformed our space in terms of so many other communities coming and using the IMC for multiple purposes. The leadership of Miriam Larson, who doesn't get enough credit for her amazing work. Seriously. DJ BJ Clark, our other amazing staff member. So, in other words, one of the things I think has played a major role in the transformation and how far we have come and how much work we have to do is the expanding use of our amazing staff. And I think that that's something that a lot of local social movements have really started to keen in on, is that because of how capitalism has taken away our capacity to organize outside of work as working people all the time, that we have people who are professionally paid staff who can strategize, who can do this specifically expertise type work. And because our IMC was committed to investing in that model, it has done a completely, just so many amazing things, and it's going to move us even further in looking at more strategic outreach. And so I do think that we have to pay attention to that aspect of our IMC, is how important our staff has been in foundationally bringing people to our space. So.
Maria, did you want to?
Yeah, just kind of emphasizing a little bit more the first part of your question where you said there's a lot of community that also isn't here. I mean, I think that the important thing there is that community is about trust building, right? And so there's a lot of communities where just because you might, say, well, I believe in social justice, I believe in these persons' rights, I believe that what's happening is wrong, that doesn't mean that marginalized people will not look at you as you are still someone who is trying to oppress them. It takes time to be able to build that bridge, particularly when we're talking about the immigrant community, when we're talking about language barriers and cultural barriers. Even myself, I have to humble myself at work and remind myself, I'm sitting behind a desk. Why would I not be just as intimidating as somebody else who could revoke them of their rights or of their privileges? So I think that it's clear that the IMC has built a lot of trust. But that being said, there's always room to build additional trust. And that takes time. And it also means putting trust into the people that are on the ground doing that work directly, interfacing with those populations, putting trust and resources into them, I think is super important as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would just, plug that I think it's a really important, we are not a big organization, we are not a big staff, and we're not a service organization, but we really think of ourselves as a member-led organization, so we need to hear from our community about what you need, not to set up kind of services, but to set up learning opportunities so that our leaders and our emerging leaders can be as prepared as they are able. Are there any other questions? Okay, right here.
I would just suggest there's maybe one thing that ties all these issues together and might facilitate a lot of what we're talking about, and that is news. And we originally founded as both an arts and a news organization, and the news aspect of things kind of has faded away to a certain degree, but just telling each other our stories, telling the stories of people in the community, both of those things tie us together and makes us all stronger collectively. And just knowing about what's going on is important. And that, I would suggest, is a starting spot for everything else that really has been discussed up here. I know in the past we had some really immediate things. We had the Newswire, which was, self-posting. It's kind of passé now in terms of social media and things like that, but we need to reinvent something like that that's maybe a little bit more immediate than the Public Eye, which does great stuff. WRFU does great stuff. But all those things need to have a little bit more immediacy because, when Migra is showing up and we write about it a month later, it doesn't really, have that same effect anyway. That's all I'm saying, to think about what you can do in terms of news and getting that news out about what you're doing, about what others are doing, what's important in the community or should be important, I think would make a big step towards all these things that we've discussed here anyway. So just something to keep in mind anyway. Having been sort of through this thing from the beginning anyway, that's just one thing that I've noticed, which is not to take away from the arts and the cultural thing at all. I think that's very important, but those are our strengths and we need to think about our weaknesses, and I think one of those is news, so, okay.
We have one question back here real quick.
Just to quickly come back on that, one of the things I've been posting on a lot more on Friends of the IMC, and I think a lot of us could use that to, on the Facebook page, to try to keep us up to date on things that you're doing in the community so that we could, all try to chime in and network with each other. And I welcome you to do that too for a show that I hold on Wednesday night or Thursday nights, Wannabe Cafe, I call it, out of WRFU. And that's, that's a big part of what I would like to see a lot more of is circles that are mutual. And I feel like when we're talking about reform, which has come up in a couple different contexts here, I'd like to kind of ask that question. For some, it seems like reform is too small and incremental, and I agree with that. But some of that's been really important. And then when I think of reform in the more key and core and structural framing sense, it's more like, okay, how do we change from, the way I look at it, having grown up in Ireland with Indigenous family during the troubles of the 70s, and my mother during the the revolution of the 20s, and her family and so on, but and still having more community during the time that I lived there than when I was in intentional community. Was very proactive in social action and going to other ones that were very proactive in ecological and very much both in those cases and being involved in many different groups. I always felt this grief of Ireland, in spite of all the grief of losing Ireland and the culture that I had there, and the intentional mutual community and culture, you know, like the intentional culture of a people, that, you know, that I even, you know, and I know this is insulting, but I told my intentional community twice that I felt more community walking down the street and running into what we would call a stranger and, you know, making contact in Ireland than I did in intentional community in the States. And so, you know, and I've had really super tragic, you know, losses in my family, and that was the biggest grief of my life. But what I'd like to say is, you know, I see some of the changes that are happening on our planet right now in terms of movements across the planet, being led by the indigenous, being led by women, especially a couple of them, as being the most comprehensive, as being, you know, the most key changes that we can have, moving towards more holistic and mutual forms from imperial forms, which I include, you know, with capitalism and, you know, the kind of capitalism we have now, which is imperial capitalism and fascism and dictatorships and all of that, trying to move us back into that instead of moving into something that's holistic and mutually balanced in all of our relations. Thanks.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. So I saw James.
Okay, thanks so much for all your wisdom and sharing your ideas, and obviously for the wonderful work that the IMC has done over the past 25 years. It's really an amazing occasion, and you all are really just an amazing panel. I just want to ask a question about one of the biggest resource untapped in this community is the university. And we kind of ignore the university, but the university's got, last time I checked, it was $3 billion in their reserves. Yep. They're buying up property all over the cities, and it just seems like people who are organizing at the grassroots should be trying to think about what's a strategy we can come up with to tap into some of the resources that the university has, because we know that communities are going to become more and more impoverished, more and more desperate, and that's an untapped resource that we need to find ways to reach into.
James,
Yes.
just on that topic, I know it wasn't a question, but I want to give an example of that. There is a student sustainability farm, and the folks who are working at the student sustainability farm, which is an awesome farm, like really wanted to make food available to the community. And I know there's been a little bit of change. They've been able to open that up a bit, but the university was absolutely opposed to it. And this is one of those moments where, I don't know, I mean, my daily reality is that SNAP is now shutting down, and that the housing authority will be out of money by the end of November because of the federal shutdown. So I met with our staff on Friday right here in the library because our office has too much radon, so we now don't have an office. So we meet at the IMC to strategize, right? And I mean, we're still open at 205. Y'all should come to 205. But the satellite office where I work was shut down. And so I was like, okay, y'all, we have more calls for service at the township now than we did at the height of the pandemic. We are now at 2,100 calls for service per month. Just for comparison, the Urbana Police Department gets 1,300 calls per month. They have 85 staff. We have 25 staff. We have 21 calls for service. And I said, okay, I don't want you to poop your pants, but I'm going to ask you, as the leadership team of Township, when the phones double in the next 3 months, which they will, when we have 4,000 people calling us, what's our strategy? Like, how do we pivot now to address that? And I want to name that piece about the university because it is a time when we have to look at every available resource in our community. And I've been talking with a lot of folks who have nice homes and eat well every day, and I've been saying, hey, this is coming, right? And I want you all to think about, as folks who hold the purse strings, that like literally the bottom is falling out of our safety net. Like it is, we are 2 to 3 months away from it being devastation, right? And getting folks to shift and pivot, like it's almost like they're like, la, 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 you know, like, I cannot hear it. And so it's going to have to be ordinary folks across the board in this community thinking about how is it that we maximize all of our local resources. During the pandemic, I'll just give an example of many examples we could give. Many of us did lots of work, was that we took and asked the park districts to open up all the lands that they could so that we could grow food. So they, of 72 gardens across Champaign-Urbana, Solidarity Gardens, where people can grow food, and anyone who's eligible, immigrant families and those eligible for SNAP, can come and garden and get what they need and grow their food. So it's like we have to think in that way, like where's the money, where's the land, where's the food, where's the housing? We have to continue to scan to look at, and that's how we got here at the IMC. We're like, where's the space? Well, there's an almost empty post office building in the center of downtown. We wanted to keep the post office here and reuse that space. And there's a lot of spaces like that. Churches that are heated and cooled all day, every day, 7 days a week, but only used 1 day a week. So I think, James, you're right to think getting really like, we already have abundance around us. As we know, it's not allocated in a just way. The resources are not allocated in a just way, but the resources are here. And so how do we tap those resources in this time is a really, really important question.
To answer James's question, one thing that I know WRFU is doing is sending an olive branch to the U of I to let them do announcements for their musical events and stuff of that nature. So building a relationship with them right now through the radio is something that we're working on. So giving them resources to talk about school upcoming events and things of that nature. So we're working at WRFU to work on that relationship.
I just want to add on one quick thing as well. This is something I've been beating for a while now. The university is a parasite on this community, and we need to stop sugarcoating that they have $3 billion. Nearly none of it goes into the operations of the university, and they pay no property tax, but they soak up all the resources in this area, and they pay the workers there absolutely nothing. So if we're gonna talk long-term in looking at Carle Hospital and the university as being those parasitic entities that have so many resources that only 5% of their budget could change and transform the political economy of this area, then we need to build long-term strategic vision about how to redistribute those resources. And I'm glad James brought that up, because at the end of the day, all the things that are happening now around the federal government, they don't have the power to do those things if we challenge the university and Carle Hospital to be equitable to the people that make those places run. You. So we need to stand up now, and we need to start having legitimate, serious conversations about what they actually contribute in terms of the material, and not just us being worried that they're the university. If something happens to them, we get hurt. No, it would actually make the university better, because their conditions are our living conditions, and we need to start seeing it that way and challenge them on it.
I think we are a community of learners, and the way in which we learn is our praxis, right? It's also how we choose to distribute resources. And so perhaps there's a connection there to cultural organizing, in that how we learn, how we practice, our practices of culture extend from the university into our daily lives. So thank you so much for joining us for this panel. We have delicious food. From Dubai Grill. Please support Dubai Grill. They gave us a good discount on this food, and also some of their owners were involved in anti-war work when I was back in high school, first getting involved with the IMC as part of AWARE. Please visit them, but for now, we invite you to eat, share with us, and get to know someone you maybe didn't know before. Take a look at David Michael Moore's beautiful representation of our panel. And this evening, yes, thank you. This evening, come back at 7:30. We have a lineup of wonderful music. And then tomorrow, actually, let me say, Mariachi Tigres, Mariachi Libertad is starting us off. Then we have therapy, and followed by Mother Nature. So please come, enjoy, and party tonight. Then tomorrow morning, we have brunch provided by Lazy Daisy. It's going to be really tasty. There's going to be eggs and potatoes and I think some cinnamon rolls. I'm really excited about those. And then we'll have some learning intermedia through collage with Danielle and with Marisa Hicks Alcaraz, and followed by another panel, the independent presses against the AI machine, which perhaps can help us think more about how to expand our news work here at the IMC. So thank you again. Thank you to all of our panelists, and go forth and party. We need just a minute to set up the food, so if you want to actually, we're going to take the first 2 rows of chairs and put them away, so there's some space to eat and also to dance. So we could replace a couple of the rows of chairs with tables. Oh, there's tables in the sunroom, so sorry, so we can leave the chairs. We'll go eat once you get food in the sunroom, and then we probably will remove some chairs later on so we have space to dance. We could take the first row, how about, since you started already, Marina. Thank you.
This is something we can do today kind of moment. You know, you like bring
It's the mega sale at Slumberland.
Up to 50% off list.
Get a comfy Lazy Boy recliner for just $3.99.
Or a modern sofa for just $3.99.
And get the chair for $99.
Plus a Sealy Queen mattress for just $3.99.
Only at Slumberland.